The speak.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session. So, a little introduction about myself. I've been in the area of school education now for the last almost 20 years. I've taught all classes from nursery till class 10 at the Sri Ram schools. That's where I've enjoyed teaching. And since I was lucky enough to teach both the sciences and the humanities, it's been a wonderful, a very rich and broad experience. I've been specializing in assessments when I did my master's in education. And since then, I have a very deep interest in how classroom data can be used to inform and improve the teaching practices that we do and student performance. In the last couple of years, I've been working with governments and with learning companies like Pearson in modernizing the assessments. So I've worked with the CBSE to improve the teaching practices in classroom assessments, and I work with the education companies to improve the quality of assessments. So these are the two main areas that I've been working on specifically in the last 5 years. One of the areas that I find is missing, or one of the stakeholders that we are not able to touch as much as we want to, is the parents directly. And that's really where I was very interested, that if I could engage with some parents and the parent community, so we are able to share with them how the world of assessments is changing within the schools on policy as well as in practice. I'll take a second. I think we'll just let people come in. Please come. All right. Okay, so we are talking about school assessments and from the point of view of parents, and this is very much in the nature of hoping to share with parents what are the difference in, let's say, the old way of assessing and the new way of assessing, and why is it that suddenly they are having to do with an assessment practically every week, and what is the end goal of assessments. We like to call it the modern assessment theory, and it differs from older assessment practices primarily from the fact that we are now using evidence of student work to inform student learning much more directly than before. Earlier, it was something called norm referencing, which is that in comparison to the group, how did the student perform? Nowadays, it has to do with compared to last month's exam or last year's result, how are you performing this year? So as the world moves more and more towards personalizing learning, we are also moving towards more and more where assessments are based on personal evidence, personal results, and that is what is driving us to allow us, the teacher, the school, the system, to genuinely personalize education. There is another big difference between the old way of assessing and the new way of assessing, and that is in the area of the use of standards. I'm sure you've heard of the Common Core that has come into the US. We in India already have the National Curriculum Framework, and the idea is that there are standards that are being set and established in almost all areas. And these standards are now becoming more and more descriptive. And it's important that as a parent, one has the awareness of, this major shift. And marks are becoming less and less the indicators of success. And more we are relying on these standards. A third difference is that earlier we used to primarily, schools would be focused on, let's say, academics and knowledge. And today, of course, the world of education is about 21st century learning skills. And that throws up a very interesting challenge. How do you assess confidence? And how do you assess empathy or respect? And today, actually, in schools, this is the area of a lot of debate. I think there is much more consensus on how do we assess academics, but in the co-scholastic area is where we are actually working very hard on. And this really is the changing face of assessments, from being norm-based to personally referenced, from being very academic-centered to more co-scholastic, 21st century centered, and of course moving towards standards referencing more than anything else. How does it look like from a parent's perspective? Well, one of the, I'm a parent. I have a daughter who's now 21, and so I'll just paint a scenario that perhaps gets repeated in many homes. So, you come home, I've come from work, and you find your child watching TV, sprawled on the bed, and the first thing that comes out is, you've been watching TV. You haven't done your homework. I've told you so many times not to do this. And it's interesting because right there and there, you've made an assessment, you've made a judgment that this is what your child has been doing. And at its most essential form, an assessment is nothing but a judgment. It's a judgment of your work, your attitude, your performance. That's what it is. And the only way you can move